Greetings there, I'm Varsha Sekta. In this video, I will explain all these programs that are written in this Google Colab notebook. Now, before proceeding towards the explanatory part, we need to understand the concept of loops. So let's understand it with a quick example. When we like a game, we just keep on playing it, right? And then we automatically repeat the process again and again, and ultimately it becomes a habit. This shouldn't become a habit, but this process of repetition can be termed as iteration. The same concept is used in programming as well. We set a part of code for looping and the same part of the code executes until the certain condition that we provided is fulfilled. Now, you must be wondering that we keep on playing that game until we stop it. So, the same scenario or process can be made in the case of loops as well. And it can be made possible if we provide a certain condition that the loops could not fulfill, then it will continue to repeat or iterate endlessly until stopped by force. So there are mainly two ways to create loops in Python. The first one is the for loop and the second one is the while loop. Alright, now let's move towards the explanatory part. So from question A.1, that's the pyramid pattern, to question B, that is the diamond pattern, I will be using the for loop and the range function. And lastly, for the question C, that is the string palindrome, I will be using input function, string slicing, and the conditional statements, that is if and else. For the first program, I mentioned the size, that is 6 in variable n. Then, for the outer and inner loop, I have used the for loop because it repeats the statement n number of times along with the range function. Also, here outer loop is set to n, which is acting as a row that will iterate or repeat. With this, our loop will run from 0 to less than n, that is from 0 to 5. Coming towards the inner or nested loop, which I have set it to I plus 1, where I is nothing but the number of rows, which will ensure that this inner loop will run for only one time in the first row, 2 times in the second row, 3 times in the third row, and so on. Thus, it's acting as a column. Now, to print these all above statements in the form of asterisks or stars, I have used the print statement along with the end parameter, which is equal to blank, as you could see over here. And by adding this end parameter, it will override the program from a new line and print stars in the same line. Lastly, I have inserted a print statement, which is the last statement of the outer loop. Now, let's check this program. Okay, you could see over here that we have got the same output as we have given in the question. Now, let's move forward towards our second part, that is the triangle. For this as well, I mentioned the size as 6 in variable n. Then for the outer and inner loops, I've used the for loop along with the range function. Also, her outer loop is set to n, which is acting as a row that will repeat. With this, a loop will run from 0 to less than n, that's 0 to 5. Coming to our inner or nested loop, for space, I set it to n minus I minus 1, where I is the number of rows, and this formula, that is n minus I minus 1, will ensure that when I is 1, it will have 4 spaces. When I is 2, it will have 3 spaces. When I is 3, it will have 2 spaces, and so on. Hence, it is acting as a column. Furthermore, I have used the print statement to print a space along with the end parameter, which will ensure that it keeps the control in the same line. Now, for the inner or nested loop for stars or asterisks, I have set it to I plus 1, that is the range, where I is the number of rows again, which will ensure that this inner loop will run for only one time in the first row, two times in the second row, and so on. Thus, it is acting as a caller again. Then, to print stars, I have used the print statement and the print end parameter, which will ensure the overwriting of the program from a new line and print stars in the same line. Lastly, I have inserted a print statement for the new line. Now let's run it. So we have got the same triangle as it was given in our input. Let's move towards our second question, that is the diamond pattern. For this, I have mentioned the size as 4 in variable n. So, to make a diamond pattern using the for loop, we need to construct two loops, that is for the upper half, as you could see over here in this image, and a lower half of the diamond. Here the first loop prints the upper half of the diamond. Suppose if the height of the diamond is 4, the upper loop prints the lines, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, that is from the upper portion of the diamond. Similarly, the second loop will print the lower half of the diamond. Like if the height given is 4, then the loop will print the lines from 3 to 1, starting from the bottom part of the top half of the diamond. Now this was all about the logic for this program. Let's proceed the code. Now, if you look at the diamond in the upper half, the number of asterisks or stars grows by 1, 3, 5, 7. You can see over here in the image. So if I is the row number of the diamond starting from the top, that is I multiplied by 2 plus 1 is the number of asterisks or stars in that row. To compensate for that increase in asterisks or stars, the number of blank spaces or white spaces on the left must decrease by 1 the further we go. Therefore, the number of white spaces is n minus 1, this one. Thus, for each row, I want to print n minus I white spaces and I multiplied by 2 plus 1 asterisks or stars, where I is nothing but the height that goes from 0 to height minus 1. So this was all about the upper half portion of the diamond. Now let's move towards the code for lower half portion of the diamond. Now let's see what happens over here. In the lower half, the number of asterisks or star decreases by 7, 5, 3, 1. That is the backward or reverse. In other words, if I is the row number of the diamond starting from the middle of the diamond, that is I multiplied by 2 plus 1 is the number of asterisks or stars in that row. To compensate for a decrease in asterisks or stars, the number of blank spaces or white spaces on the left must increase by 1 the lower we go. So the number of white spaces or blank spaces is n minus 1. Here, for each row, I want to print n minus I white spaces and I multiplied by 2 plus 1 asterisk, where I is the height that goes from minus 2 to 0. Now, if you talk about the range specifically, here I have used a reversed range, where the first parameter n minus 2 is the starting value for the range. The second parameter, that is minus 1, specifies until which number and range continues, that is it stops at 0 when it is at minus 1. The third parameter, minus 1, specifies the step size, and this minus 1 range goes from larger number to a smaller one. Lastly, I have inputted a print statement for a new line. Alright, so let's have a look at our output. So our output is as similar as our input. Alright, so let's move towards our last, that is string palindrome. Before moving towards a program, we need to understand the meaning of this word palindrome. A palindrome is a string value where its original string value is equal to its reverse string value. For example, mom, dad, wow, did, etc. So coming towards our program, firstly, I've entered the input statement as you could see over here. This will allow the user to enter any string value of the choice, which is beginning and ending with a small letter. Now, whatever string value that has been entered by our user will get stored in the variable A. Coming to our next line where I've used the string slicing, which is useful for finding out the reverse of these string values. As you could see over here that I have start the slicing from -1, that is the computer will check from the last character or letter of the string value that the user had inputted. Now this is all about the start value. After that I have the colons along without any end value because I don't know that after how many characters will the string value character will be end, that is inputted by the user. Then for the step value, I'll set it to -1 because if the computer starts checking the code from -1, it will again reach to -1, and as we all know, -1 and -1 will be equal to -2. After reaching -2, it will again move towards -1, making it -3, which is equals to -2 and -1, and this process will repeat till it has reached the last character of the string value inputted by the user. Now this ends the part of the string slicing. After this, it will check that if A is equal to B or not. If yes, then it will print the following statement, that is, it's a string palindrome. Or else, it will print it's not a string palindrome. Now let's check this out. I'm entering mom. So it's saying that it's a string palindrome, which is correct. Let's try another one. I'm writing a string value which is not a string palindrome. Let's check it. So it's not a string palindrome. It's working alright. So this was it. Thank you so much for watching this video.